3 days before my sister's wedding, a bridal shop owner grabbed my arm and shoved me into a fitting room. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "don't come out." I thought she was crazy. Then my parents walked in. Through one thin wall, I heard the truth they had hidden from me for more than 20 years. By the time I walked out of that room, I wasn't just my sister's maid of honor anymore. I was the woman who was about to destroy everything my father had spent his life building. I stood on the porch of my childhood home in suburban Virginia, duffel bag, slung over my shoulder, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. After 12 years in the U.S. Army, including 2 tours in the Middle East, I had finally taken leave to attend my older sister's wedding. 36-year-old Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Morgan, and yet stepping back into that house made me feel like the awkward 16-year-old who couldn't wait to enlist. Dad was the first to greet me. William Morgan, tall and silver-haired, still carrying himself like the successful businessman he was. His hug was brief, almost obligatory. "Rachel," he said, his voice flat. "Don't do anything to ruin your sister's big day, all right? This is about Emily." The words landed like a slap. I forced a smile. "Wouldn't dream of it, Dad." Mom Linda hovered behind him, offering a quick peck on the cheek and a nervous smile. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over Dad's sharp edges. Emily bounded down the stairs in a sundress, her blonde hair bouncing. At 38, she still had that golden girl glow that seemed to light up every room. She threw her arms around me. "Rach, you're really here. I need you to pick up some accessories for me at Margaret's boutique tomorrow. The pearl earrings and that vintage veil pin. Pretty please. You're the only one I trust with good taste." I laughed, despite the knot in my stomach. "Of course, Em. Happy to help." That night, sleep evaded me. I lay in my old bedroom staring at the ceiling, replaying Dad's cold welcome. I had spent years proving myself, promotions, deployments, medals, and still in this house I was the outsider. The daughter who ran off to play soldier while Emily stayed close, built the perfect life and captured Dad's endless pride. The next morning I drove to Margaret's Bridal Boutique, a charming little shop tucked between a cafe and a flower store. The bell above the door tinkled softly as I entered. Racks of pristine white gowns filled the space, their fabrics whispering promises of forever. An older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind but weary eyes looked up from the counter. Margaret Lewis, I assumed around 68, exactly as Emily had described. She froze when she saw me. Her face paled and she clutched the edge of the counter. You're Rachel Morgan," I nodded, surprised. "Yes, ma'am. Emily sent me for some accessories." Without another word, she hurried around the counter, grabbed my arm with surprising strength, and pulled me toward the back of the store. Her grip was urgent. "Come with me, quickly." Before I could protest, she ushered me into a spacious fitting room at the far end, the kind with heavy velvet curtains and a small upholstered bench. She shut the door behind us and locked it with a soft click. The room smelled faintly of cedar and rosewater. "Stay here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't make a sound. Don't come out. Just listen." My pulse quickened. "Mrs. Lewis, what's going on? I don't understand." "Shh." She placed a finger to her lips. "Your family is coming. There are things you need to know, child. Things I've carried for 20 years. She slipped out, leaving me alone in the dimly lit space. I sank onto the bench, my mind racing. This had to be some kind of mistake. But before I could gather my thoughts, the front doorbell rang again. Footsteps, familiar voices. Dad's deep baritone carried clearly through the thin wall separating the fitting area from the main salon. "Margaret, we're here for the final fitting adjustments on Emily's gown. Make sure everything is perfect." Emily giggled. "Daddy's been so generous with all this." "I can't believe the wedding is only days away," Mom murmured, something soothing. Then Dad spoke again, his tone dropping to that confidential register he used when discussing business or family matters he considered settled. "I told you both keep Rachel out of the spotlight. She's here because Emily insisted, but let's not pretend she belongs. That girl has always been a complication, never should have stayed this long in the picture." My breath caught. I leaned closer to the wall, every muscle tense. Emily's voice was lighter. "She's my sister, Dad. She served our country. Can't you give her a little credit?" Credit, Dad chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. She chose the army over this family years ago. Let her have her little career. After the wedding, things will go back to how they should be. Emily gets what she deserves. Rachel. Well, she was never really ours to begin with. The words hit like a physical blow. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle any sound. My eyes burned. Through the wall, I heard them moving around, discussing lace and hems, as if my father hadn't just casually dismantled my place in the family. Margaret's voice cut in, politely guiding them. But underneath the normal conversation, something darker lingered in the air, secrets long buried now pressing against the thin barrier between us. I sat there, hidden in the fitting room, my disciplined soldier's mind reeling. What else had they hidden from me? What had I spent my life trying to earn from people who had already decided I was unworthy? Then Margaret returned her face, etched with quiet urgency. She carried a small dusty wooden box tied with faded ribbon. "Your mother, your real mother left this for you," she whispered. 20 years ago. She made me promise to give it to you if you ever came back. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The weight of it felt like the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew. I clutched the old wooden box in my lap, its surface worn smooth by time, while Margaret stood guard at the curtain. Through the wall, the conversation continued, each word carving deeper into wounds I didn't know I still carried. Dad's voice grew more animated as he spoke to Emily and Mom. "Look, sweetheart, I've always been straight with you. Rachel was a mistake. Your mother and I were young, struggling. We thought another child might fix things, but she only made everything harder. Always so independent, so stubborn. Running off to the army the first chance she got. That's not the daughter I raised to carry on the family name." Emily sounded hesitant. "Dad, she's done well for herself. Lieutenant Colonel now." "That's not nothing." "Nothing compared to what you've built," he shot back, pride swelling in his tone. "You stayed. You supported me through the business. You're the one who deserves the house, the investments, everything I've worked for. Rachel doesn't get a share. Never has. I made sure of that years ago." My stomach twisted. I had sent money home during deployments, skipped promotions to help with family emergencies Dad never fully explained. All those years of proving I was worthy, and he had written me off before I even enlisted. The fitting room felt smaller, the air thicker. I could hear the rustle of fabric as Emily tried on her gown, Mom offering soft compliments, but Dad's words drowned everything else. Margaret touched my shoulder gently. "They're almost done. Stay quiet a little longer." Her eyes were full of old sorrow. "Your real mother, Sarah, came to me 20 years ago. She was sick, knew she didn't have much time. She left that box and begged me to keep it safe. Said if you ever walked through my door looking lost, I'd know it was time." I stared at her, my throat tight. "Linda isn't my mother." Margaret shook her head. "Linda came later. Your father moved fast after Sarah passed. Too fast. Sarah wanted you to have the truth one day." The front doorbell rang again as my family left the boutique. Margaret waited until their voices faded down the street before she let me out of the fitting room. We sat in the back office, a small room filled with sewing supplies and faded photographs of happy brides. I set the box on the table between us, my fingers tracing the faded ribbon. With trembling hands I untied it. The lid creaked open. Inside were treasures and ghosts, a stack of yellowed photographs, a leather-bound journal, several official-looking documents, and a sealed envelope addressed to me in elegant, fading handwriting. I picked up the top photo first. A young woman with my eyes and dark hair smiled at the camera, holding a baby me in her arms. Behind her stood Dad, younger, but already wearing that distant expression I knew too well. Another photo showed Sarah alone on a beach, wind in her hair, looking peaceful. Tears blurred my vision. The letter came next. I broke the seal. "My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're old enough to know the truth. I fought hard to stay with you, but the cancer won. Your father, he changed after you were born. He wanted a son, someone to carry his legacy the way he imagined. I tried to protect you, but I was weak. There's a trust fund in your name, my inheritance from my parents. A house on the coast in North Carolina. Investments I set up before I got sick. William promised he'd manage them for you. Please find James Harper, the lawyer whose card is in this box. He knows everything. I love you more than life. Be strong, my girl. Don't let them dim your light. Mom. I read it twice, my chest aching with a grief I had buried long ago. The vague memories of hospital visits, of a gentle voice singing lullabies, they rushed back now sharper than ever. Linda had always been kind, but distant, like she was playing a role she never fully embraced. Margaret watched me quietly. She was a good woman, came in here looking for a simple dress for a renewal ceremony she knew she'd never have. We talked for hours that day. She trusted me because I had no ties to your father's circle. I flipped through the journal. Sarah's neat handwriting filled pages with worries about Dad's growing coldness, her fears that he would favor any future children over me, her careful records of the financial arrangements she had made. There was a copy of my original birth certificate listing Sarah as my mother, and at the bottom of the box a copy of an old will clearly naming me as primary beneficiary of the trust. My hands shook as I set the documents down. He stole from me, from her memory. Margaret nodded. I didn't know the full extent, but I suspected. He erased her, Rachel. Photos disappeared. Stories stopped. He wanted Emily to be the only daughter that mattered. I thought of all the times Dad had praised Emily's accomplishments, while mine received only grunts of acknowledgement. The holidays where I flew home only to feel invisible. The pride I felt in my uniform that seemed to embarrass him. Anger began to replace the shock, slow and burning. I had spent years trying to earn a place at a table where I had already been crossed off the guest list. But now I had proof. Proof that my mother had loved me enough to fight for my future even as she was dying. I gathered the contents carefully and looked at Margaret. Thank you for keeping your promise. She squeezed my hand. Be careful, dear. Your father is a powerful man. But you have the truth now, and strength most people only dream of. I left the boutique with the box tucked securely under my arm, the Virginia sun now feeling harsher against my skin. The drive back toward home was a blur. Inside, I was already shifting from the daughter who sought approval to the soldier who gathered intelligence and planned her next move. This wasn't just about a family rift anymore. It was about justice for a mother I barely remembered, and the life that had been stolen from both of us. The box sat on the desk in my temporary quarters at a nearby hotel. I couldn't stomach staying under Dad's roof anymore without giving myself away. I had checked in under a different name for good measure, the soldier in me already moving into tactical mode. Sleep came in fragments that night, haunted by Sarah's handwriting, and the faint scent of old paper that clung to everything she left behind. The next morning, I followed her instructions precisely. James Harper's law office was in a quiet part of Richmond, the kind of place with dark wood paneling and the steady tick of a grandfather clock in the waiting room. When I introduced myself, recognition flickered across the older lawyer's face immediately. Rachel Morgan, he said, extending a firm handshake. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. Your mother was very clear about her wishes. Over the next 2 hours, James laid everything out with the precision of a military briefing. The trust fund Sarah established was substantial, nearly $2 million seeded from her family's estate, plus the beach house in North Carolina, and a diversified investment portfolio. Dad had been named trustee with strict instructions to preserve and grow the assets for me. Instead, he had treated it like his personal account. James slid printouts across the desk. These are the records I could access through public filings and what your mother left with me. But we'll need subpoenas for the full picture. I stared at the columns of numbers, wire transfers to personal accounts, consulting fees paid to shell companies linked back to Dad, properties sold and repurchased under Emily's name. The beach house, my beach house, had been quietly transferred years ago. Every birthday check I received as a child, every college fund contribution had been crumbs from a table that was supposed to be mine. Rage simmered beneath my skin, controlled but alive. I thought of the times I had wired money home from deployment pay, believing I was helping the family, believing I was proving my worth. All while Dad drained what Sarah had fought to secure for me. We start digging, I told James. Quietly, I want everything documented." He nodded, respect in his eyes. "You've got the discipline for this. Most people come in emotional. You're thinking like a commander." Over the following days, I maintained the facade at home. I smiled through family dinners, helped Emily pick out flowers, and listened as Dad boasted about the future he was building for his girls, meaning only one of them. Inside, I was compiling evidence with James. Colonel David Carter, my old commanding officer, reached out after I sent a careful message. He had always been more of a father figure than my own. "Rachel, whatever you need," he said over a secure call. "I'll stand by the record of your service and character. You've sacrificed enough." The investigation revealed a pattern stretching back 22 years. Shortly after Sarah's death, Dad began shifting assets. Small amounts at first, testing the waters, then larger sums as his business grew. He had forged signatures, created fake investment reports sent to me during my early Army years, and used the money to fund a lavish lifestyle and Emily's opportunities. The beach house was now listed under a trust benefiting Emily, my trust. One evening, while pretending to help with wedding favors at the house, I slipped away to the study, the same room where Dad used to lecture me about responsibility. I found old file folders hidden in a locked drawer, amateur work for someone who thought no one would ever look. Bank statements, a copy of Sarah's original will that he had never probated properly, notes in his handwriting outlining how to minimize Rachel's exposure to the family wealth. My hands clenched around the papers. I photographed everything on my secure phone before replacing them exactly. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was erasure. He had removed every photo of Sarah from the family albums, rewritten history so that Linda became my mother in every story told to friends, made me the difficult daughter who chose duty over family, when in reality he had pushed me away the moment I started asking questions about the woman in the faded pictures. I sat in my rental car afterward, staring at the house I no longer recognized as home. The weight of it pressed on me, the lost years, the love I had chased from a man incapable of giving it. But beneath the pain, something harder formed. Resolve. James called with another update. "We have enough for civil action, possibly criminal if we push on the forgery. But timing is critical. He's preparing to move the last major assets into Emily's name right after the wedding. We strike when he feels safest." I drove to the coast that weekend under the pretense of a solo hike. Standing on the beach near the house that should have been mine, waves crashing against the shore, I felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever. The salt air stung my eyes, or maybe it was tears I finally allowed myself to shed. "You tried to protect me," I whispered to the wind. "I'm going to finish what you started." Back in town, I continued playing the role of the dutiful, slightly distant sister. Emily chattered about honeymoon plans while I nodded along my mind, mapping out every contingency. Colonel Carter agreed to provide a character statement if needed. James built the case brick by careful brick. Dad had stolen more than money. He had stolen my history, my security, and decades of a mother's love I could never get back. But as I reviewed the growing file late one night, the soldier in me recognized the tactical advantage I now held. He thought the wedding would be his victory lap. Instead, it was going to be the moment everything he built on lies came crashing down. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into a carefully orchestrated performance. I smiled when expected, laughed at Emily's nervous jokes, and helped arrange centerpieces at the country club reception hall, as if my world hadn't been blown apart in a bridal boutique fitting room. Every interaction with Dad required iron control. He would pat my shoulder and say things like, "Glad you're here to support your sister," and I would nod, swallowing the bitter taste of betrayal. Emily was in full bride mode, radiant and demanding in that endearing way only she could pull off. "Rach, can you pick up the programs from the printer and make sure they spell Daniel's middle name right this time?" I did it all without complaint. The more helpful I appeared, the less they watched me. Meanwhile, James Harper worked quietly in the background building an airtight case. Colonel Carter had already reviewed the documents and offered his full support. One evening, as we went over the rehearsal dinner plans, Dad pulled me aside in the hallway. His expression was serious, the same look he used when closing business deals. "Rachel, for the ceremony, I'd prefer you wear something normal. A nice dress, not the uniform. This is Emily's day. We don't need guests asking questions or making it about your military service." The request stung, but I kept my face neutral. "Whatever you think is best, Dad." Inside, it only hardened my resolve. He didn't want the lieutenant colonel standing there as a reminder of the daughter who had succeeded on her own terms. Fine. I would wear the dress. But I would bring the truth. James met me at a small cafe the next afternoon, far from family eyes. He slid a thick folder across the table. "We've got bank records showing transfers as recent as last month. Your father's preparing to shift the final holdings, the remaining investment accounts, into a new trust for Emily right after the honeymoon. If we wait too long, it'll be much harder to unwind." I scanned the pages, my jaw tight. "Then we do this at the wedding, when everyone's watching." He spent years building this perfect image. Let it shatter in front of his audience. Colonel Carter joined us via video call, his face steady on the screen. "You've got my statement, Rachel. Your service record speaks for itself: multiple deployments, leadership under fire, and the way you've quietly supported your family financially, even when they didn't deserve it. I'm willing to stand up and say it publicly if needed." Their support anchored me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in this fight. The rehearsal dinner went off without a hitch on the surface. Daniel, Emily's fiancé, was polite and a little nervous, a successful architect who clearly adored my sister. I watched Dad toast to family and new beginnings, his arm around Emily's shoulders, while I sat at the far end of the table. Mom caught my eye once or twice, a flicker of unease crossing her face, but she looked away quickly. She had always known more than she let on. The night before the wedding, I laid out the simple navy dress Dad had indirectly approved. Next to it, folded neatly in my suitcase, was my army dress uniform. I ran my fingers over the insignia, the ribbons earned through sweat and sacrifice. I wouldn't wear it to the ceremony as requested, but I would have it ready. Sleep was restless. I kept thinking about Sarah's letter, the way she had tried to shield me even in her final days. The beach house I had never seen but could picture perfectly from old photos. The life I was supposed to have. Wedding day dawned bright and clear, the kind of Virginia summer day that made everything look picture perfect. The ceremony was set for late afternoon at a historic estate with rolling lawns and ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss. Guests arrived in elegant attire, champagne flowed and laughter filled the air. I moved through it all like a ghost in my own story, helping Emily with her veil, posing for photos, where Dad made sure I stood slightly behind everyone else. As we waited in the bridal suite, Emily grabbed my hands, her eyes shining. "I'm so glad you're here, Rach. It means everything." I squeezed back, meaning it despite everything. "You deserve to be happy, Em." She didn't know yet. None of them did. From the back of the venue, I watched Dad escort Emily down the aisle. She looked breathtaking in the gown we had fitted that fateful day. Daniel's face lit up with pure joy. The vows were beautiful, traditional, full of promises about love and partnership. I sat rigid in my seat, feeling the weight of the folder James had prepared, now safely with him, and ready to be delivered at the right moment. During the reception, under strings of lights and a live band, Dad gave the first toast. He spoke of Emily's accomplishments, her loyalty, how she had always made him proud. Not once did he mention my name or my years of service. Guests smiled and clapped, but I noticed a few curious glances in my direction. They knew the older daughter was in the military. They wondered why it was never acknowledged. I sipped my water, pulse steady. The perfect day they had orchestrated was about to become something else entirely. James had confirmed the final piece that morning. Dad had scheduled a meeting with his financial advisor for the Monday after the honeymoon to complete the asset transfers. If I let this wedding end without action, Sarah's legacy and my future would disappear forever. As the evening wore on and the dance floor filled, I caught Colonel Carter's eye across the room. He had arrived as a guest, looking sharp in his own uniform. He gave me a small, supportive nod. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The wedding they wanted me to attend quietly was about to become the stage where I finally spoke the truth. The reception was in full swing, golden light spilling across the manicured lawns as the sun dipped lower. Laughter and clinking glasses created the soundtrack of a perfect day, exactly what Dad had demanded. I stood near the edge of the tent, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching him work the crowd like the seasoned businessman he was. His smile was broad, his posture confident. This was his masterpiece, Emily's wedding, the sealing of his carefully curated family legacy. Emily and Daniel shared their first dance twirling under the soft lights, while guests sighed with approval. I clapped along with everyone else, the weight of the documents burning in my mind. James was positioned discreetly near the entrance, Colonel Carter beside him. They were ready. Then came the moment I had anticipated. Dad stepped up to the microphone after the cake cutting, tapping the side of his glass for attention. The crowd quieted, turning toward him with expectant smiles. He looked every bit the proud father, silver hair, gleaming tailored suit impeccable. Family and friends, he began, voice warm and resonant. Today is the happiest day of my life. Watching my beautiful daughter Emily marry a man who truly deserves her. Well, it doesn't get better than this. Applause rippled through the guests. Emily beamed from her seat. Dad continued building momentum. Emily has always been the heart of this family. Loyal, graceful, always putting others first. She stayed close, built a life here, and made me prouder than any father could ask. Daniel, you're getting the best woman I know. More cheers. I kept my expression neutral, though my grip tightened on the glass. Then his tone shifted just enough for those who knew our family to catch the undercurrent. Of course, we're also glad Rachel could make it home from her duties. She's been off serving in the army for many years now, always running toward danger instead of staying where she was needed. He chuckled lightly as if sharing a fond joke. Some kids just have to find their own path, I suppose, even if it means missing so much of real family life. A few polite laughs followed, but I felt the sting of the words, the subtle dismissal. Guests glanced my way with pitying expressions. Poor Rachel, the distant daughter. I stood tall, shoulders back, refusing to look down. In my periphery, I saw Mom shift uncomfortably in her seat. Emily's smile faltered for just a second. Dad kept going, pouring on the charm. But today isn't about old disagreements. It's about Emily and the bright future ahead. To my daughter and her new husband, may your life be filled with the love and success you both deserve. The applause was thunderous. Dad raised his glass high, basking in the moment. For him, this was validation. The perfect culmination of years spent elevating one daughter while diminishing the other. He had no idea the ground was about to shift beneath him. As the band struck up another song and guests began mingling again, I caught James's eye. He nodded once. It was time. James Harper walked into the reception tent with measured steps, a thick leather portfolio under his arm. Colonel David Carter followed in full dress uniform, medals gleaming. The sight of them, two authoritative figures entering with purpose, caused a ripple of murmurs. Heads turned. Conversations quieted. Dad noticed them immediately. His smile froze, then faltered as recognition set in. James had represented clients against him in business years ago. Colonel Carter was an unknown quantity, but his presence commanded respect. "What's this?" Dad asked, voice still jovial but edged with tension as he moved to intercept them. "Gentlemen, this is a private family celebration. If you're here for congratulations, we appreciate it, but..." James spoke calmly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "William Morgan, we're here on behalf of your daughter Rachel Morgan. There are matters that can no longer wait." I stepped forward, then moving through the parting crowd until I stood beside them. My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. "Dad, we need to talk. Now. In front of everyone who just heard you speak." Emily rose from her table, confusion clouding her face. "Rachel, what's going on?" Dad's complexion had gone pale beneath his tan. He glanced around at the watching guests, many of whom were prominent in local circles, business associates, old friends, people whose opinions mattered to his reputation. "This is neither the time nor the place," he hissed under his breath. "Whatever grievance you have, Rachel, we can discuss it privately after the honeymoon." Colonel Carter's voice cut through, calm and authoritative. "With respect, Mr. Morgan, the evidence suggests this has waited long enough. 20 years, in fact." James opened the portfolio and began laying documents on the nearest table, copies of bank records, the trust agreement, Sarah's letter transaction histories. We have proof of misappropriation of funds from a trust established by Sarah Morgan for her daughter Rachel, forged documents, undisclosed transfers. Assets that rightfully belong to your daughter have been systematically moved, including plans to complete the final transfers this coming week. Gasps spread through the crowd. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Mom looked stricken, sinking back into her chair. Dad's perfect day, the one he had controlled so meticulously, was unraveling in real time. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound was strained. This is ridiculous. Family financial matters being aired like this, Rachel. You're embarrassing yourself and your sister on her wedding day. I met his eyes directly, the years of suppressed pain and newfound clarity giving me strength. No, Dad. You embarrassed me for years. Today, the truth finally gets its say. The guests watched in stunned silence as the confrontation built. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider looking in. I was the one holding the mirror up to the man who had spent decades shaping the reflection to suit himself. His perfect day was far from over. The reception tent had gone deathly quiet. Crystal glasses remained untouched, the band's music faded to nothing. All eyes were fixed on the unfolding scene. Dad stood frozen for a moment, his face cycling rapidly from shock to anger, to a desperate attempt at control. "This is outrageous," he sputtered, stepping forward as if he could physically push the evidence away. Rachel has always been dramatic, twisting stories to make herself the victim. These documents, whatever they are clearly fabricated or taken out of context. James Harper remained unflappable, his voice carrying the quiet authority of decades in a courtroom. "Mr. Morgan, we have original records from your late wife Sarah Morgan's estate. A trust fund established in 2004 for Rachel's sole benefit. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals and transfers totaling over $1.8 million. Forged signatures on asset transfer documents. And this," he held up a copy of Sarah's handwritten letter. A final message from a dying mother to her daughter. I watched Dad's eyes dart around the room, calculating escape routes that no longer existed. Guests whispered among themselves. A few older family friends who had known Sarah looked genuinely horrified. Margaret Lewis had arrived quietly just minutes earlier, invited by James as a corroborating witness. The elderly boutique owner stepped forward, now her voice clear despite her age. "I can confirm it. Sarah came to me 20 years ago. She left the box with me and made me promise to give it to Rachel when the time came. She feared William would try to erase her entirely." Emily rose slowly from her chair, her wedding gown rustling. Her face was ashen. "Dad, what is she talking about? Rachel, is this true?" I turned to my sister, pain and compassion mixing in my chest. "Mom, Sarah left me a trust, a house, money meant for my future. Dad has been taking it for years, moving it to accounts you benefited from. He told me today in the boutique that I was an accident, that I was never supposed to have anything." Emily's eyes widened. She looked at Dad, searching his face for denial. "Daddy..." He tried to recover, reaching for her hand. "Emily, sweetheart, don't listen to this. Rachel's always been jealous of what you have. I've only ever tried to protect this family." Colonel Carter stepped forward, then his uniform a stark contrast to the celebratory setting. His voice was steady and commanding. "I've known Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Morgan for over a decade. She has repeatedly turned down promotions and choice assignments to be available for family needs. She has sent financial support home while deployed. Her character is beyond reproach. The idea that she would fabricate this is insulting to her service and her sacrifice." The evidence continued to pile up as James presented more documents, detailed transaction logs, emails between Dad and his accountants, discussing how to shield assets from Rachel's claims, even copies of property deeds showing the beach house quietly deeded toward Emily years ago. Emily sank back into her chair, tears streaking her makeup. All those opportunities. The down payment on our first house. It wasn't just you being generous. Her voice broke. "I was part of this. I benefited while my own sister was being robbed." Daniel put a protective arm around her, looking stunned. The perfect groom now witness to a family implosion. Dad's defenses crumbled one by one. He tried bluster. "This is a private matter," then threats. "You'll regret this, Rachel. But each statement was met with cold facts from James. Guests began murmuring louder. Some stood up uncomfortable but unable to look away. A prominent businessman Dad had courted for years shook his head and quietly left the tent. Mom Linda finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "William, I told you this would catch up to us. I should have said something sooner. I was weak. I'm so sorry, Rachel." I looked at her, seeing the guilt she had carried for decades. There was no hatred left in me for her, only sadness for the woman caught between loyalty and truth. Dad's shoulders slumped as the weight of public exposure settled on him. The man who had controlled every narrative for 30 years was losing the script in front of everyone who mattered. His reputation, built on the image of the devoted family man, lay in tatters. James concluded calmly, "Civil proceedings will begin immediately. Assets will be frozen pending full accounting. Mr. Morgan, I suggest you retain counsel." As security quietly escorted Dad away from the microphone to prevent further scene, Emily approached me on unsteady legs. "Rach, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the full extent." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tremble in her wedding dress. "I believe you. We were both his pawns in different ways." The reception that was supposed to celebrate new beginnings had instead exposed decades of deception. Guests filtered out in hushed tones, the fairy lights now illuminating a very different kind of truth. Dad's perfect day had collapsed completely, and in its ruins the possibility of something more honest finally had room to grow. The weeks that followed the wedding were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and quiet reckonings. William Morgan's carefully constructed world continued to crumble under the weight of evidence. Civil investigators moved quickly once James Harper presented the full dossier. Accounts were frozen, properties placed under review, and Dad found himself facing not only financial restitution, but the very real possibility of criminal charges for forgery and embezzlement. The man who had once dictated the terms of our family's story now spent his days meeting with lawyers, his reputation in tatters among the circles that had once admired him. I didn't gloat. The victory tasted bittersweet, more like justice finally served than sweet revenge. With James's help, I recovered the trust fund, most of it at least. The beach house in North Carolina was returned to my name, its keys now resting in my pocket like a tangible piece of my mother's love. Some of the money I directed immediately toward something meaningful, establishing a scholarship fund in Sarah Morgan's name for young women pursuing careers in public service or the military. It felt right, like closing a circle she had started long ago. Emily reached out first, 2 weeks after the wedding. Her honeymoon had been cut short by the scandal, but she asked to meet me at a quiet cafe near the coast. She arrived without makeup, eyes still puffy from crying. We sat across from each other, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and renewal. "I was so blind, Rach," she said, voice thick with emotion. "I believed everything he told me about you. That you chose to leave us. That you didn't care enough to stay. I let him use me as the golden child while he stole from you. From our real mom." She reached across the table and took my hands. "I'm so sorry. I want to know her now through your stories, through the things you have. If you'll let me." Tears welled in my eyes as I nodded. "We were both manipulated, Em. But we don't have to stay that way. I'd like to try being sisters again. Real ones." Over the following months, we slowly rebuilt. Coffee dates turned into weekend visits to the beach house where we pored over Sarah's journal together. Emily began volunteering with the Scholarship Foundation, channeling her guilt into purpose. The bond we forged in the aftermath was stronger than the one built on lies. Linda came to see me one quiet afternoon at the hotel where I was staying before returning to duty. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the truth. "I was weak," she admitted, staring at her hands. "I knew Sarah. I knew what William was doing, but I convinced myself it was better for everyone if we moved on. I failed you as a stepmother. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Rachel. I just needed you to know I'm sorry." I hugged her then, not out of obligation, but because carrying hatred would only weigh me down. Some wounds heal slower than others, but I chose not to let them define my future. Colonel Carter checked in regularly, proud of how I had handled everything with dignity and strength. "You faced fire on the battlefield and in your own home," he told me. That's the mark of true leadership. As summer faded into fall, I packed my bags once more. The army had been my chosen family for years, and now I returned to it lighter, unburdened by the need to prove myself to people who could never see my worth. Standing in the mirror in my dress uniform, ribbons aligned and shoulders straight, I felt whole. The final morning before deployment, I stood on the beach near my mother's house, watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft pinks and golds. The American flag at a nearby veterans' memorial snapped in the ocean breeze. I touched the scholarship folder in my bag and whispered the words that had carried me through the darkest revelations. Family isn't always the people who share your blood. Family is the ones who choose to stand by you when the truth finally comes to light. I turned toward the future with clear eyes and a steady heart. I want to know how this story touched you. Did Rachel's strength resonate with your own experiences of family struggles and redemption? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We have so many more powerful stories like this to share with you every single week, so please subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's keep walking through these journeys of truth and healing together.